So I want to roll into this Joe Biden executive order story. So I came across this on the American Prospect. I have a membership with them. I recommend getting it. They're really good, and specifically David Dayen. He's really good. It's another guy on here too. I always forget his name, but I got into them because David Dayen was writing for them. He wrote a couple articles for the Intercept, and that's how I found out about him. But yeah, so they have a little section on here that talks about the day one agenda. And basically, these are laws already on the books that give a president great discretionary power for constructive change without abusing executive authority. So this is basically things like this is executive orders Joe Biden could do that are lawful, that are on the books. These are laws that are already on the books. And I just found it interesting talking about this because the conversation is about what Biden can't do without the Senate instead of trying to find things that he can do. Instead of talking about what he can't do, let's talk about what he can do. And they found 277 policies for which Joe Biden need not ask permission. And it's just fascinating because nobody's really talking about this. I know I saw Sam Cedar did a video with him, so I applaud the Majority Report for bringing David Dayen on to talk about the day one agenda. But it's not a lot of people on here talking about it, so I want to talk about it. One of the ones that caught my eye off the rip is how Biden could give everyone Medicare on his own. Oh, yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. The people of Libby, Montana, population 2,628, share something in common with the rest of the developed world, but not their compatriots in the United States. They all have access to a single-payer Medicare for All system. As part of the Affordable Cares Act, the residents of Libby who were exposed to hazardous airborne asbestos from a vermiculite mine owned by the W.R. Grace Company were made eligible for Medicare for free at the discretion of the Social Security Administration and the Department of Health and Human Services. It was codified in Section 1881A of the Social Security Act. The language of the same statute refers to any individual subject to an environmental exposure, though it was well understood at the time that this was about Libby. The fact that the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, Max Baucus, hailed from Montana, played no small part in creating Medicare for all Libyans. Wow. But the principle was solid. Through no fault of their own, these residents were subject to a dangerous environmental hazard that would trigger long-term medical complications. The government considered it only right to pick up the exorbitant healthcare cost for these individuals. There's an environmental health hazard spreading through the entire country right now. It's infecting people unsuspectingly and killing hundreds of thousands. It's bound to saddle those who survive with long-term and potentially debilitating health consequences. And using Section 1881A, the incoming Biden administration can give all 11 million people infected with COVID, and if they want to be really aggressive, all Americans who have tested positive for coronavirus the option of free Medicare coverage immediately. Since 1789, the legislative branch has been placing a set of powerful authorities in the president's lap. I do not expect Joe Biden to use this power because Joe Biden is bought and paid for by the insurance companies and Big Pharma. I do not expect Joe Biden to use his power on inauguration day to instantly turn the United States into a single-payer country. I do. Sorry, I do. I mean, I would want him to, but I don't expect him to either. But there's nothing in the law that would appear to prevent him from doing it. This is the larger point. The United States Code doesn't make for scintillating leisure reading, but buried in it are countless options for a president to help people. And once you start orienting yourself in that fashion, thinking about what you can do under the law rather than what you cannot, the possibilities really open up. The primary pilot program in Section 1881A is the Libby, Montana program, but the executive branch is also given the authority to establish optional pilot programs to any area subject to a public health emergency declaration. The United States has been under a public health emergency since January 31st, 2020, due to the coronavirus. It's possible that the Environmental Protection Agency will have to declare a separate public health emergency under the Superfund law to comply with the statute. But Biden's EPA administrator could easily, there we go, do so. Individuals eligible for Medicare will have to have spent 6 months in the geographic area to subject to the emergency, since the area is the entire United States. This should not be a problem. So basically, all this gets into how basically you can apply that Medicare program that they applied in 1881 of the the section of the Affordable Care Act, and basically give everybody Medicare for all. Hang on. Maybe Biden doesn't want to instantly create Medicare for all, but through a range of laws that vest power in the president, he could seize drug patents to dramatically lower the cost of prescription drugs. He could change bad Obamacare rules that cost low-income families using the exchanges roughly $2 billion every year. He could do all kinds of things laid out in the day one agenda that will have tangible and enduring benefits for people. But he's not going to fucking do that. He already told the Black Caucus he's not going to do any of this. But again, this is things that instead of talking about what Joe Biden can't do and pushing voting as the solution, how about we push putting pressure on Joe Biden to actually deliver for fucking people? That's what you should do. How about we say we're not going to vote in the Georgia elections unless Biden promises via executive order to do this. But you're not going to hear a lot of people saying that. This is the one I found very interesting because, we have Neera Tanden in office, so probably isn't going to happen, but rethinking the poverty measure. And one of the things they talk about in here is basically the fact that the official poverty measure, based on an outdated calculation designed 60 years ago, is absurdly low, based merely on income. The measurement doesn't take into account geography, the cost of expenses like childcare and housing, or non-cash benefits like tax credits. Today, the federal poverty threshold for a family of 3 is $20,578. In a reflection of the limits of the measure, federal and state programs often use different interpretations of the OPM to define eligibility for anti-poverty programs. For instance, eligibility for SNAP, commonly called food stamps, is based on gross income at or below 130% of the federal poverty guidelines. And in 2011, the Obama admin introduced the supplemental poverty measure, which recognizes regional cost of living and some program benefits to complement, not replace, the poor absolute measure that is the OPM. We've known that the OPM is a bad measure for some time, yet politics and inertia have kept it intact. No, corruption has kept it intact. But on day one, the incoming Biden administration can drop the OPM entirely and alter poverty measurements so that it better reflects need in the United States, and also lay the groundwork to meaningfully tackle it. And it continues, some advocacy organizations have developed their own measurements for poverty in the United States. The Poor People's Campaign, for example, is motivated by data showing that 140 million people are poor or low income. That's by their data, which makes more sense to me, in my opinion. Let me see what their website looks like. This is all right. I don't have time to go through that whole website, but that's 43.3% of the country's population. The calculation is easy. It's anyone living at less than 200% of the supplemental poverty measure. It includes the approximately 40 million people living under the traditional threshold, as well as about 100 million people who are just above it. Because the current poverty measure only reflects income, it effectively erases the working poor, which is very true. The PPC calculation shifted the landscape of who we're talking about when we talk about poverty. So basically, all this is boiling down to that you can change the poverty rate so you can actually extend aid to people that need it, that can't get it now. Like when I'm reading stories about, it was this one story I read where this lady literally got arrested because she lied on like an application or something to qualify for Medicare, and her kids to qualify for Medicare. She literally she was working, a working poor class woman, but she made too much and she couldn't get it, so she lied, and they ended up putting her in prison for it. And it's like, you hear stories like that all the time across the country, and it's like Joe Biden can change this when he gets in office. This isn't now. Don't take this segment as me like begging Joe Biden to do it, because I know Joe Biden is not going to do it. That's not what this is. This is showing the neoliberals that went out and voted for Joe Biden because they said he's better than Trump. Well, I'm asking you to stand with us to pressure him to prove that he is. I know that he's not, but you ass swipes don't know that he's not yet. I'm trying to either A, expose to you that he's not, or B, pressure him to be better than Donald Trump. But I know that it's not going to happen because all they care about is how many women of color he has in his cabinet, whether there's a black man fucking dropping bombs on brown people, or a white woman, whatever. Make sure it's a woman or a white woman or a black man or a black woman. It's fucking ridiculous, man. It's fucking ridiculous. This is real shit Joe Biden can do. Nobody's talking about it. This is Biden on the agricultural sector, if it ever loots. Biden on the farm. The president can remake agricultural and food policy even if Congress refuses to do anything about them. President Donald Trump has repeatedly assured America's farmers that he loves and respects them by calling them great patriots. But on his watch, a trade war ravaged their sales, leading Trump to institute a bloated and poorly targeted bailout program. Also on his watch, about 75,000 meatpacking, food processing, and farm employees have gotten sick with COVID. Nearly 350 have died. The agricultural, and this is like, just talking about that real quick, like Donald Trump has handled the coronavirus poorly, and I think that's what served him up on a platter when it came to the election and why Joe Biden won the election, because Trump didn't take it seriously. He just didn't. Like, and if you're a Trump supporter, you can deny whatever you want to deny about the virus. I'm not somebody who's saying buy completely into what the government's saying, but there are a lot of people who have been suffering, not just from the economic fallout, but have actually lost family members that voted for Biden because of that. And also Trump's handling of it and not taking it seriously. And if you're not taking that into account is why you have people in the streets thinking the election was stolen. I digress. There was a part in here. Where is it at? Oh, yeah. One important move would be undoing Trump's farm bailout, a mea culpa for his trade war that hammered American farmers. After Trump levied billions in tariffs on many foreign made products, American farmers shouldered the retaliation as their sales abroad dried up, particularly in China. So basically, Trump said, we're going to put these sanctions on you. China said, all right, bet, we're not going to buy your fucking food from your farmers. And that's what happened. To make sure rural America stayed in his column, Trump started sending farmers direct payments, which came to $28 billion in 2018 and 2019, larger than the entire 2008 auto bailout. Most of the money has been funneled to the wealthiest 10% of farmers, many of them corporate operations, not actually family farmers. Biden should scrap it and start over, argued Scott Faber, senior vice president for government affairs at the Environmental Working Group. The new president could redesign relief so that payments are not based on production levels as they currently are, under which larger corporate farms that produce more get larger amounts, but instead based on proof of real financial need. That sounds fair. That can also free up Biden to take his own proactive steps. Once he undoes Trump's farm bailout, he can repurpose that money to protect farm workers during the pandemic, Faber said. He can and should direct it instead for personal protective equipment, but also to help reconfigure meat and poultry packing plants to make them safer and to make sure that workers have suitable housing and transportation, he said. It should also fund spaces where sick farmers can go to self-isolate, he added. Another urgent item awaiting correction are the waivers that the Trump administration granted to meat and poultry processing plants to speed up their lines. This year, 15 poultry plants were given permission to increase their line speeds above the current Department of Agriculture cap. allowing them to kill and process more birds per minute despite their previous histories of serious accidents. Worker advocates have warned that the increased speeds will mean more injuries for workers in an already dangerous workplace. And animal rights advocates argue workers will have even less time to ensure humane slaughter techniques. The danger has only grown during the pandemic. Researchers found that plants that received these waivers saw their surrounding counties experience a disproportionate rise in COVID cases. Trump also issued waivers allowing pork plant employees to increase line speeds and to self-inspect animals coming down the line, which put an end to those USDA inspections. So basically, Trump has been rolling back like a lot of regulation on these things, but this is something that, again, something that Joe Biden can do, and it's like nobody's talking about it. I think you're gonna get it eventually. Like, oh, it's so ridiculous, man. But I'm just going to continue. Now, this is for the labor, specifically the contract system. Now, Joe Biden can't raise minimum wages or raise the minimum wage to $15 by himself, but he can increase the minimum wage of workers that are federally contracted. He can increase their wages to $15 per hour. There are approximately 15 million federal contract workers. They don't know the exact numbers are unknown, but the federal contracts have often been caught violating wage and hour laws, workplace health and safety standards, and stealing workers' wages. It's more of like a race to the bottom, and it actually puts the responsible contractors, the one that that actually do it right, abide by the laws, basically do right by their workers. It puts them at a competitive disadvantage. So you have all these fuckers that are abusing their workers that get most of the work, and the ones that do it honestly that don't, and it leaves them as at a disadvantage. The Biden administration, it could use its executive power to improve federal contract workers' wages and working conditions. It could also remove sub-minimum wages for tipped workers, youth workers, and workers with disabilities. It could also expand the Obama era paid time off, sick, family, and medical paid leave. The mandate agencies could improve bidder evaluation process via the price realism and analysis, which basically says like, oh, can you do the work for this price without basically fucking over your workers, as it says. And it could mandate the agencies to provide high quality data on a federally contracted workforce so that A, we know how many there are, and B, again, what conditions they're working in and their wages and things like that. And this could all be done through instituting. He could institute the Office of Purchasing for the Common Good to control all this. So Joe Biden could literally change the lives of about 5 million people, like day one, by doing this. He's for the $15 minimum wage. Prove it. When it comes to the cannabis industry, the president-elect moves towards federal marijuana liberalization. It doesn't add up to legalization, and there will be tougher issues on the drug policy front ahead. Shortly after the election, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer sent a Dear Colleague letter to members that outline legislative priorities for the waning days of the 116th Congress. One of them is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and the MORE Act. Hoyer indicated that the bill may come up for a vote in early December. It did, and it passed. A legislative victory, albeit in just one house, would complement decisions by voters who legalized marijuana in 5 states earlier this year. So there were a lot of states that voted to legalize marijuana. New Jersey, it's legal in New Jersey or decriminalized, I think. Is it legal? The wording is kind of weird. I think it's legal because you can go in the store and buy it, basically. The MORE Act reflects realities on the ground. Marijuana is now mainstream, on par with alcohol and tobacco. Pot consumers want to consume in peace. Ganjapreneurs want to quit hauling around trunkloads of cash and looking over their shoulders for bad guys, and law enforcement just wants to be done with all of it. So this is something that could be done. But Biden, one of the original war on drugs warriors, now supports decriminalization, swayed by the overwhelming evidence that locking people up for minor marijuana infractions ruins lives and wastes law enforcement of public resources. The president-elect supports expungement and giving the states the power to regulate the emerging legal industry without continually worrying about capricious federal actions. Joe Biden's evaluations on the marijuana policy should not be understated, said Justin Streichel, political director for NORML, the marijuana advocacy group. He's gone from one of the chief architects of escalation of marijuana arrests in recent history to now calling for its decriminalization. But cannabis legalization, which is what the MORE Act's descheduling would amount to, hasn't found favor with the president-elect. The 2020 Democratic Party platform stripped out references to marijuana, a step backwards from 2016. That Democrat Representative Barberly of California, a co-chair of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus and a longtime legalization leader, voted against adding a legalization plank to the party platform, speaks volumes about the pressure placed on legalization advocates to get in sync with Biden. In a scenario where legislative and administrative descheduling have been ruled out, Biden could direct the DEA and the FDA to move marijuana to Schedule II of the Controlled Substances Act with other drugs with only a high potential for abuse, like morphine, codeine, and fentanyl. So basically, legalize it's a detriment to the marijuana business, which is growing exponentially. And it's like, a lot of people I've read stories where people, like they said, they're carrying around trunk loads of money because they can't do banking with it. And it's like they're looking over their shoulders, worried about getting robbed. They're worried about law enforcement. Dude, just legalize it so people can make their bread. Point blank, period. This is something that you can do to help. And finally, I want to get to the coup de grace that everybody's probably knows about, and that's the student debt. With a flick of the pen, Joe Biden could cancel all student debt. And this, as an architect of the, what is it called? As one of the key components of the Bankruptcy Reform Act, I don't see this happening either. Joe Biden literally is the reason why the college, the education system fucks over college students now the way it does, and doesn't allow them to get out of the debt the way it does. Joe Biden did that. So these are all things and you guys know the whole thing with student loan debt. Student loan debt would literally inject trillions of dollars into the economy. It would take a lot of stress off of people. The benefits there's more benefits than downsides, which I personally don't see downsides, but just I know there are conservatives that say they see downsides, whatever. But it doesn't benefit just the super wealthy like it does, because most of the people that hold student loan debts are minorities. Most of them are minorities. So, and low income, and coming from low income housing, low income families. So again, these are all things Biden could do, but I know Joe Biden's not going to do them because Joe Biden doesn't give a shit. Joe Biden ran on bringing morality back to the White House while sticking his fingers up in women without their permission, while running corrupt Ponzi schemes with his fucking kid, while bombing the fuck out of Muslim people and stealing their fucking oil. This is what 40 years of his career has amounted to. And it's like he's not going to change. The only difference now is that literally he's going to just be coasting. He's on autopilot right now. He's on neoliberal autopilot. That's what Joe Biden's on right now. Joe Biden's on on whatever drugs he's on, and is on neoliberal autopilot. So Joe Biden's not going to do any of that shit.